The next 2 weeks passed in a blur for Layne. He had commitments, interviews, photo shoots he barely remembered afterward, band meetings where he sat in the corner and let the others do the talking. The machinery of success kept grinding forward, demanding his presence, his participation, his compliance. He thought about calling Kurt every day. He thought about it, picked up the phone sometimes, dialed half the number. But he never completed the call. Part of it was the drugs. They made everything seem like too much effort, made reaching out feel impossible, made isolation seem like the only bearable option. Part of it was fear. Fear of acknowledging the darkness out loud in the light of day, without the protective cover of night. So he didn't call, kept telling himself he would do it tomorrow. Tomorrow always seemed more manageable than today. He heard rumors, heard that Kurt had left rehab early, heard that Courtney was worried, heard whispers of concern from people who had never seen Kurt this bad. But Layne was drowning in his own darkness, didn't have the capacity to reach out. He told himself Kurt would be okay, that Kurt had survived before and would survive again. None of it was true. At April 8th, 1994, Layne was in his apartment when the phone rang. He almost didn't answer. Phones had become his enemy, always bringing demands and obligations. But something made him pick up. It was Sean, one of the band's roadies. His voice was strange, tight. "Layne, you heard?" "Heard?" A pause. Too long. About Kurt, Layne's stomach dropped. He didn't need to hear the rest. Somehow, he already knew. They found him this morning. At his house. Layne. He's dead. The words hit him like a physical blow. He sat down, hard on the edge of his bed. What happened? Shotgun. They're saying he did it himself. The room tilted. Kurt was dead. Kurt, who had sat next to him just 2 weeks ago. Kurt, who had asked if Layne felt it too. Kurt, who had said maybe survival was enough. He wasn't surviving anymore. The weight had finally become too much, and Layne had never called him back. The days after Kurt's death were a nightmare from which Layne couldn't wake. The media descended on Seattle like vultures. Every outlet wanted to dissect Kurt's life, analyze his death, turn his tragedy into content. Kurt's face was everywhere, his voice on every radio station, and Layne was supposed to function, supposed to keep going, supposed to pretend he wasn't falling apart inside. He thought about their last conversation constantly, replayed it word by word, searched for signs he should have seen, warnings he should have heeded. "Do you feel it too?" The question echoed in his head. Kurt's voice quiet and tired and desperate for connection, and Layne hadn't answered, had let the speak for him. What if he had said yes? Would it have given Kurt something to hold on to? Some reason to believe he wasn't alone? Or was the ending already written? Layne would never know. That was the worst part, the not knowing. The eternal question mark hanging over that silence. The memorial for Kurt Cobain was held on April the 10th at the Seattle Center. Thousands of fans gathered outside, holding candles, singing Nirvana songs. Inside, friends and family tried to say goodbye to someone who had left without warning. Layne attended, stood in the back, away from cameras, dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. He didn't speak to anyone. Courtney read from Kurt's suicide note. Her voice broke repeatedly. The words were raw and painful. Layne listened, heard Kurt's final words, heard the pain and exhaustion, and he recognized himself in those words. Saw his own darkness reflected in Kurt's despair. They had been fighting the same battle. Kurt had lost, which meant Layne could lose too. After the service, he walked until he found a bar that was dark and empty, sat there for hours, drinking, thinking, trying to figure out how to go on when going on felt impossible. In the months after Kurt's death, Layne's addiction deepened in ways that terrified everyone who loved him. Some people thought Kurt's death would be a wake-up call for Layne, thought it would shock him into sobriety, thought watching his friend, his peer, his fellow traveler in darkness, end his own life would scare Layne straight, would force him to confront his demons, would make him choose life over the slow suicide he was committing every day. Those people didn't understand addiction. Not really. Not in the way you have to understand it to know why it does what it does. Fear doesn't cure addiction. Terror doesn't cure it either. Watching someone else die from the same disease you have doesn't make you want to get better. Sometimes It just makes you want to join them. Sometimes it makes the darkness seem even more inevitable, the ending even more certain, the escape even more appealing. Layne found himself talking to Kurt sometimes. In his head, late at night, in the darkest hours when the drugs had him floating in that strange space between consciousness and oblivion. That space where everything feels far away and close at the same time, where the boundaries between the living and the dead seem thin enough to reach through. He had the conversations they had, said the things he should have said that night in Capitol Hill, answered the question that he'd been unable to answer when it mattered most. Yes, Kurt, yes, I feel it too. I feel it every single day. I feel it right now. Sitting here alone in the dark, wondering if this is all there is, wondering if the pain ever stops, wondering if you found what you were looking for on the other side. Did you find peace? Is it quiet now? Is the weight finally gone? Can you breathe again? Or is it still there, even in death? Is there no escape? Not even at the end? Kurt didn't answer. Of course he didn't answer. Kurt had been gone for months now. The conversation was one-sided, a monologue disguised as dialogue, and would be one-sided forever. But Layne kept having it anyway, night after night, because it was all he had left of Kurt. The memory of that night, the weight of that unanswered question, the silence that spoke louder than any words ever could. Alice in Chains released their self-titled album in 1995. It was darker than anything they had ever recorded before, heavier, more brutal in its honesty, more unflinching in its examination of the places Layne was going, the depths he was sinking to, the places he might never come back from. Songs like Grind and Sludge Factory and Over Now laid bare his deterioration for anyone willing to listen. The lyrics didn't hide anything, didn't soften anything, didn't pretend that everything was okay when everything was falling apart. They were confessions set to music, warnings disguised as art, suicide notes stretched across guitar riffs and drum beats. But the song that meant the most to Layne, the song that he could barely perform without feeling something crack open inside him, was Nutshell. He'd written it about Demry, his girlfriend, the love of his life, who was fighting her own desperate battle with addiction. But after Kurt died, the song took on new meaning, deeper meaning, meaning that went beyond any one relationship or any one loss. It became about loss itself, about the people who slip away from you no matter how hard you hold on, about watching someone you love disappear into the darkness while you stand helpless on the shore, unable to save them, unable to follow, unable to do anything except bear witness. We chase misprinted lies. We face the path of time. And yet I fight this battle all alone. When they performed Nutshell at MTV Unplugged in 1996, something happened that no one in that audience would ever forget. Layne's voice cracked on the final verse. His eyes were closed behind those dark sunglasses. He looked like a man who was already half gone, already surrendering to something the audience couldn't see but could feel pressing down on the entire room. That performance became iconic, became legendary, became the defining image of Layne Staley in his final years. The sunglasses hiding eyes that had seen too much pain, the frail body that had once commanded stages with raw power, the voice, still hauntingly beautiful, still impossibly powerful, but broken now. Broken in ways that couldn't be fixed with rehab or therapy or love or anything else. People who watched that performance knew in their bones that they were witnessing something important, something final. A last testament from a man who was running out of time and knew it. A goodbye disguised as a concert. After 1996, Layne Staley disappeared from the world. Not literally, he was still alive, technically. Still breathing, still existing in his apartment in Seattle. But he had withdrawn from everything and everyone completely. No more performances, no more interviews, no more public appearances of any kind, no more phone calls, no more visits, just silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. His bandmates tried everything to reach him. Jerry Cantrell, his closest friend in the band, his musical soulmate, called constantly, every day sometimes, left message after message on the answering machine, knocked on his door until his knuckles were raw, tried everything he could possibly think of to pull Layne back from the edge he was teetering on. But Layne wouldn't come back. Couldn't come back. The darkness had finally consumed him completely. had wrapped itself around him so tightly that there was no room left for anyone or anything else. He thought about Kurt often during those long, empty years, thought about the question that still echoed through his mind every single day. Do you feel it too? Thought about the answer he had never given, the silence that had said everything and nothing at the same time. Sometimes, in his darkest moments, he wondered if Kurt had found a shortcut, had simply decided that he was too tired to keep fighting, too exhausted to continue the battle that never seemed to end, had chosen the only exit that guaranteed the pain would finally stop. Layne understood that choice better than he wanted to admit, understood the appeal of just stopping. No more fighting, no more struggling, no more waking up every morning to face the same weight pressing down on your chest. No more pretending that things might get better when you knew in your heart they never would. But he didn't take that shortcut. Not directly, anyway. Instead, he chose the slower path, the gradual dissolution, the long, agonizing goodbye that would stretch across years. He stopped eating properly, stopped leaving his apartment, stopped answering his phone, stopped opening his door, stopped responding to the people who loved him and were desperate to help him. He existed in the smallest possible way, shrinking himself down until there was almost nothing left. The drugs were there, of course, always there, the constant companion that had promised to make the pain bearable and had instead made everything infinitely worse. But even the drugs felt like a formality now, a habit more than a need. The real addiction was to the darkness itself, to the weight he had stopped trying to carry, to the surrender that had become the only choice he felt capable of making. In the spring of 2002, Mike Starr came to see Layne one last time. Mike was the original bassist of Alice in Chains, before he'd been replaced by Mike Inez. He and Layne had a complicated history stretching back years, friendship mixed with conflict, love mixed with resentment. The kind of relationship that only people who have created something together and then watched it fall apart can truly understand. But underneath all of that, beneath all the arguments and the disappointments and the betrayals, there was a bond that nothing could break. They had built something beautiful together, had shared stages and studios, and the particular intimacy of creating art as a unit, as brothers. Mike came to Layne's apartment building, climbed the stairs, knocked on the door, waited in the hallway, heart pounding, not knowing what he would find on the other side. For a long time, nothing happened. The door stayed closed. The silence stretched on and on, unbearable, terrifying. Then, finally, slowly, Layne opened it. Mike would later describe what he saw in that doorway, would tell interviewers years afterward about the shock that went through him like electricity. Layne had lost most of his teeth to the drugs. His body was skeletal, wasted, barely there. His eyes were sunken deep in their sockets, hollow, the eyes of someone who was already more gone than present, more ghost than man. But he was still there, still alive, still somehow against all odds surviving. They talked. Mike didn't stay long. The conversation was difficult, painful, full of silences that said more than any words could. Two old friends who had once been so close, now separated by a chasm that neither knew how to cross. But before Mike left, before he walked out that door for the last time, Layne asked him something. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper, but the words were clear. Stay with me. Mike couldn't, had obligations waiting, had reasons he told himself were important, had excuses that seemed valid at the time, said he'd come back soon, said they'd talk more later, said all the things you say when you're not ready to face the magnitude of what's standing right in front of you. And he left, walked down those stairs, got in his car, drove away. He didn't go back. Didn't come back. Life got in the way, and time passed, and the visit became a memory that Mike would carry with him for the rest of his life. Stay with me. Layne's voice, asking for help in the only way he knew how. And Mike, like Layne with Kurt 8 years earlier, didn't have an answer. April 5th, 2002. Exactly 8 years and 1 day after Kurt Cobain's body was discovered, Layne Staley died alone in his apartment. Dead for 2 weeks before anyone found him. Weighed only 86 pounds. The cause? Speedball, heroin and cocaine. He was 34 years old, same age as Kurt, same age as Hendrix, Joplin, Morrison. The news spread slowly. He'd become mythical in his absence. It took time for the world to accept that the voice was gone forever. Jerry Cantrell was devastated, but there was terrible inevitability too. They'd been expecting this call for years. Layne had been saying goodbye for a decade. The world just hadn't been listening. Two voices of a generation, two men consumed by the same darkness, two deaths that bookended an era. But the detail that haunts people most is that question. Do you feel it too? Kurt asked because he was desperate for someone to say yes, desperate for proof he wasn't alone. And Layne couldn't answer, not because he didn't feel it, because he felt it too much. What if he had answered? Would it have changed anything? We'll never know. That's the tragedy, but maybe that's the lesson. The importance of reaching out, of saying yes, of admitting the truth, even when it's terrifying. If someone asks you that question, answer it, because you might not get another chance. 20 years later, Layne's voice still echoes. Nutshell still makes people cry. Rooster still connects with anyone fighting a war no one else can see. When people think about Kurt and Layne, they think about loss. Two voices that understood each other. Two deaths that remind us the brightest flames burn out fastest. Do you feel it too? The question is still waiting for a response. Yes, we feel it too. And we're still here. Still fighting. Still surviving. For Kurt. For Layne. For everyone who ever felt the weight. The answer is yes. The answer has always been yes.